Hello, everybody.
Hey,
Thank you for joining us today. We want to welcome you to another episode of JAWS Mental Health Awareness.
thank you.
Hold on.
Okay.
Today is October 2nd, 2023. And we are going live slightly early, right before our regular schedule of 2:30 Central, 3:30 Eastern, as we do each Monday, except for the holidays and other times that we are not working. And we hope that you also are taking time off as well. All righty then. So we're live, we're on air, and welcome to Mental Health Awareness. Thank you for joining us for this episode on October 2nd, 2023. This is another episode of JAWS Coffee Chat with Jennifer A. Whitaker and our co-host, Lucero Martinez.
Yes.
Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our social media pages, groups, and YouTube channel, or wherever it is that you found out about us. And we always want to give a special thanks to some great folks for replaying our shows on their platforms. Marcus Hart of Transforming Media, Zach Clayton of the PAC channel, and Jay Stoyan of the Disability channel, along with Lawrence Wingate of Wingate Studios. We definitely appreciate their support and participation. And before we get today's conversation started, we want to mention our sponsor and express our gratitude for Stanley, who is supporting our podcast this month. Please be sure to check out their website at https://shopstyle.it. And of course, you will see this link in the description of our video, as well as below the video on social media, and see what all they have to offer. Gifts for others, gifts for yourselves. Thank you for your support, Stanley. More about them later in the show, but let's get to the show and turn it over to Lucero.
Let's do it. Hey, y'all. This is Lucero Martinez. Jennifer, thank you for having me on this episode. Super excited about talking about mental health. I think it's something that we all need to be talking more about out loud, not just with our therapists. You know, we all have a mind, we all have a brain, we all have mental health, and mental wellness to discuss and get educated on and just share. So many people deal with stuff silently, and that just needs to stop. We all need to talk about it. So thank you so much for having Mental Health Mondays.
Yes, definitely. And actually, we have a specific topic to talk about today. Let's see what we can get started on.
All right.
Many of y'all who often watch this show know how we always have a different part of mental health that we talk about each week. So going back to last week's discussion on boundaries, we ended up with a question about, do you feel responsible for people's feelings, choices, and behaviors? This week, we are going to start our discussion off with another question. Let's talk about choices. Are you responsible with your choices? How often do you use the phrase, I had to, she made me, he made me, when you explain why you did or didn't do something?
Mm. You're asking me. Okay.
Yes, of course. Discussion question.
That one. Ooh, that one. Yeah. Sometimes I hear that from people. I think I used to do that a long time ago. And a long time ago, I can't pinpoint when, but I learned to own my stuff. Like, no one can make us do anything unless they're physically threatening us to do something. Even then, we still have a choice, right? So there's so much personal freedom in knowing that you have a choice in everything we do. And I think we've been programmed to think that we don't a lot of times. I could talk about so many things, but
Yes, some things like what I think you're talking about are cultural, which is
literally,
that if our parents
yeah,
say we have to do it, then we don't have a choice. At least that's a perception versus you
yes,
could disobey your parents.
yeah. I'm thinking even just like advertising, right? And things you even things that you think you need. But that's a tangent, right? But it's pervasive. And I think that once we learn that we own our mind, we own our thoughts, and that's a boundary thing too. It all ties in, right? We
Right.
can make choices. And I think that if we choose to live by default rather than design, which is something that I've learned um, at my place of worship. That's something we say, live by design, not by default. Then we get to choose our choices and what our life looks like. And I know, if we have families and kids and stuff like that, there are certain things we have to do. But I think bringing that power and control back to ourselves and really having that awareness of, yeah, we have choices and no one can make us do anything. We can be emotionally responsible for ourselves, and people have to be emotionally responsible for themselves. All we can do is support them if they're struggling, and we got to do self-care for ourselves too. I love
Definitely.
how that ties into the boundaries. Yeah. What
Yes,
are
that's
your
what we were talking about in our last one.
yeah.
But on the flip side, think about some situations where you didn't take responsibility for your own actions. Whom are you blaming for what circumstances happened in your life? Are you blaming other people when clearly it was your own responsibility to take action?
Hmm.
How
I'm
many
sure
times
I
do we blame
have.
our boss? What about
Oh
blaming
yeah.
our bosses?
Yeah. Our bosses, our professors, you know.
Yeah,
Oh, that teacher, that professor didn't like me, so that's why I got a 69 in the class and I didn't pass 1 point because they didn't like me. If they liked me, they could have just added 1 point and I would have passed or whatever, right? And
right.
it's putting that locus of control like externally versus internally. And it's that whole bias we have sometimes of when things go wrong, it's everyone else's fault, right? But when things
And
go
that's exactly
right,
what we're
it's
talking
our
about.
doing. Yeah.
That's exactly what we're talking about. It's the need to take responsibility.
Yeah.
So, like your example with the blaming the professor because he didn't give us that 1 point. Well, was it possibly, let's say if I was the one in school, is it
Yeah.
possibly my fault because I just didn't study? Was it
Hmm.
truly honestly someone else's fault versus the idea that we don't want to take responsibility for our own actions, with the example being that I chose not to study?
Right. It can be so empowering when we finally realize that we actually have a say in everything most of the things that happen to us. But that
Right.
takes work. That takes work. That takes looking ourselves in the mirror, and that takes taking self-responsibility, like you said. Maybe if
Well,
I
and
didn't, you know, go
I was
ahead.
going to say, and well, even when it's things that we think we don't have control of, like let's say the pandemic, well, we were in certain points of history in different regions of the US required by law to wear masks. So we
Mm,
could say that the government made us, but in reality, we could have just gone to jail and not done it. We still had a choice.
yeah, accepting the consequences. There's always a choice. That's right.
But I think typically people say that somebody made them do it when they actually um, didn't want to face the circumstances, or they didn't want to take responsibility because say that they did not want the consequences, but neither did they want to do the whatever that was a call of what needs to be done or not done. They chose to go the opposite direction and don't want to accept the responsibility, but they blame it on someone else.
Which at the end of the day, I think makes things harder anyway. Like you get that immediate gratification of, oh, that's not my fault. That's not, my responsibility. But then at the end of the day, we feel like disempowered and like victims anyway. So it's like it doesn't end up working. And don't get me wrong, I sometimes do this when I'm maybe not being aware or something, but it's like something I've learned is really trying to be conscious about not doing that, because in my experience, it just makes things less easy at the end of the day. Because then it's like, I feel like I don't have a choice in my own stuff, Yeah, for sure.
But then that leads us to the next step, which is now let's get into our thoughts. We must own our own thoughts. Do you think things through for yourself, or you tend to accept other people's ideals and let them do your thinking for you?
As an only child,
So
do you know where this is going? Honestly, I've always had like sometimes in a lot of situations like different thinking than other people.
But unique may be good.
Yeah. Gosh, there's so many thoughts on this. The general answer is I try to think myself. If there's teamwork that has to be had and stuff, we have to collaborate. But I can maybe be a little sometimes on the non-conforming side, and I use that word very carefully because it has a certain connotation. It's not a rebellion thing, but it's like I get a lot of ideas. I have a lot of thoughts. I generally live in my head a lot. And so I try to balance listening to others, but forming my own thoughts, owning my thoughts. I'm not perfect, but I try. And then there's the whole balance though between when do we accept maybe like if someone's in a position of authority or just trying to guide us, like where's the boundary between letting other types of input in versus having your own thoughts, et cetera, et cetera. But I try to be careful if I am being influenced by someone or someone's thought processes or whatever, like I know that's a conscious thing, or I try to make it a conscious thing. Does that make sense? Did I answer the question? Because it's a simple question, but there's so much to it in my mind, I think.
That is, but that's why we call it a discussion question as opposed to a simple answer question, right?
Okay.
Because we could go into a lot of other things.
Yeah.
Like, let's say, like something you and I were talking about an hour or so ago.
Mm-hmm.
When we get depressed,
yeah,
we have these false thoughts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it wasn't my fault. It was my depression.
Ooh, yeah. Ooh, that's good.
So how many of our different kinds of mental health conditions? Because remember, we're focused on mental health.
Yeah.
So how many times do we not take responsibility saying, like I was just with my therapist and I was saying to her how I got so depressed on Saturday that for once I reached a point that I lost interest in everything from my job I love, the people I work with I love, my friends, my hobbies, like everything. And usually I don't reach that point. Usually if I get depressed in my personal life, I just work more because I love my job. So
yeah,
we have different ways to balance ourselves, right? The things we enjoy. And she and I were talking about how I reached that point where I lost interest in everything and even my will to live.
Yeah.
And most people would have actually then say attempted suicide or ODing or I don't know what, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I actually said to myself on Saturday when I reached that point, I said, I've got to do something more than just sit here.
Right.
Like generally I'm an active person because like I've told you about like having my gym membership. I work out a lot. And I did a research and actually found that a lot of the symptoms I go through are not just independently mental health, but they're caffeine addiction.
Mm.
But the different symptoms I show is depression, worsening of depression, worsening of anxiety that I already have, and all these other things. That's where it ties into the mental health because
Yeah.
it's its own thing, but it impacts, at least in my case, and scientifically, you could tell us if this is consistent, it impacts the mental health because it impacts the different chemicals. Like I forget it starts with an A, but there's adrenaline or something that's this certain chemical that's disabled in our brain by caffeine.
Yeah.
You know what
It,
chemical I'm talking about?
well, let me remember. So it actually blocks the neuroreceptors that make you tired. I have to go back and
Yes, but you know
tell.
what I'm talking about then.
Yeah, it's a similar name to that, but it's like I have to go check it out. But yes, it does. And then when you're crashing, right, from caffeine, it's like, or you haven't taken it in a little bit, once you've taken it a whole lot, it's like, your body's like compensating, and then the energy. It's actually, I think, aside from nicotine, no, it's like the number one addictive substance. Was it nicotine or caffeine? Those are the top two in the world. That's a
But
whole
those are among
thing.
the legal ones, right?
Oh yeah, we're talking. Yeah.
So I was going to say, I'm sure there's a lot, well, a lot of them that are a lot higher, but are either on the line of debatability of whether they're legal, like the CBD and marijuana, or are clearly illegal, like say cocaine and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. I think nicotine and caffeine, since they are legal and they're like worldwide, that's probably why the statistic is they're the most, like the most widely substance that people are addicted to. Let me rephrase. But yes, that's a whole discussion. But when you're talking about the depression and owning our emotions when we are struggling with depression or anxiety, yeah, that can be rough because it could totally be a cop out, right? Like, okay, I
Yeah.
recognize that I am struggling right now. Let's say it's depression, not sadness. We're talking about like depression, clinical, right? Even we can talk about sadness too, but I'm referring to that. And it's, for me, whenever I've struggled with that, late when from what I've learned in therapy, it's nice to be able to like separate it and be like, hey, this is my depression. This isn't who I am as a person. This
Right.
is a set of symptoms that I struggle with. And so I can, if I separate myself from that, then I can cope better, but it takes me actually realizing it when I'm in that state. And sometimes we're in that state so consistently at a lower level that we forget that that is actually not normal. And it's like a mental health like dysfunction or a brain chemical thing. That's been my experience before, where I've had such a low level of anxiety and depression for a long time that it was like, I thought that was my personality when it wasn't. Again, that's a whole discussion too.
It
But
is. Hey, how about we welcome John?
oh, hey John. Hey
Hi
John.
guys, how are you guys doing?
We're
How do you
doing
Good.
pronounce
good.
your first? How do you
Go
pronounce
ahead.
your first name?
Lucero or Lucero, it's
Lucero.
Spanish. Pick. Yes.
Okay.
Nice to meet you,
Yeah,
John.
it's good to be here. I guess I was going on the wrong Zoom, but here I am.
So here's where our
Yeah,
next discussion question goes. Are you expecting people to read your mind? To whom are you afraid to communicate your thoughts? What do you think keeps you from doing so? Do you think if you communicate your thoughts, you will get a negative outcome.
No, I just forget to, especially my wife, I forget to inform her where I'm at a particular time. And I've got to communicate that with her, you know. My depression, and I've told Jennifer this before, I almost committed suicide about 11, 12 years ago. I had a hip replacement that became infected, and I had to go through about 8 operations trying to fight the infection, and then they had to cut about 4 inches of my femur bone off. So within about 2 months after the operations, I started getting very, very depressed. Everything was gray, and it started getting worse, got really black. And I was put into a group home for about 2 weeks. And they said turned out that it was situational depression because of how many times they took me under for my operations and stuff like that. But to be honest with you, I think I always suffered from a low-grade depression throughout my whole life. So that's just made it worse. But I have gone to a 12-step program, a men's 12-step program, and they have given me tools to work with, you know, but I forget to work the tools. Sometimes I just forget. And I'm not sure at times if I'm just sad that day or if I have a low-grade depression, you know. I just
Some
know
ways
that,
to, I was going to say, some ways to know if you're just sad versus depression is, are you losing interest and drive in things you once enjoyed?
Right.
yeah, yes and no, comes and goes. There are days that I don't want to get out of bed. Other days, when there's a lot of stuff going on, then I can handle it. It really depends every day too, you know. I don't know. I just know that I wish I didn't have it, and I just wish that it's like this big burden all the time. I would like to feel things. You know what I'm saying? Really feel things. I would like to really feel happy. Uh, I can feel anger though. I have anger issues, and sometimes it's like,
Isn't that
is that
interesting? We say we want to feel things, and then we also at the same time, because of our conditions, we feel certain things more than we want to. It sounds like it contradicts, but it really is true.
right?
It's like zero ways of the negative emotion.
I'd like to feel more joy in my life. I just feel like it's just so level sometimes. I don't know. It's just it's a complicated thing, you know, for all of us. What kind of depression do you feel? Depression too, Sarah?
Yeah. I've struggled with depression. I think mainly, because of trauma stuff, right? And so the prolonged like emotional dysregulation and just like, for sure, I can definitely relate. And there's so many factors in there, like motivation and like, do we have a passion in life that helps motivate us to maybe get out of bed that day? But it's like so complex. And sometimes, it's really hard when people have not experienced that. It's really easy to be like, oh, but you have this and you have this going on for your life and this and this. And it's like, sometimes people don't get it, and then it turns into like toxic positivity and stuff like that. So, I mean, I can definitely relate to what you said. For me, what's helped the most is my faith. That's a whole other discussion. But for me to believe in something like bigger than myself, and therapy, obviously, a lot of therapy, a lot of
How about
therapy.
medication from a psychiatrist and that kind of things? Have those helped too?
I actually haven't tried medication.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. And it's something I had considered in the past, and it probably would have helped. But for now, I haven't. My medication has been faith. I've been able to get into art with art therapy that I actually recently really
Yes.
started getting into. Being able to create something that I just, there's no rules, has really helped me. And I'm trying alternative methods, but I think for me, since it's been very like trauma based, complex PTSD based, there was a lot that I needed to work through, if that makes sense. And then like there's the whole somatic aspect of it where trauma stays in your body, because I understand intellectually what my mind does and everything, but there's just so much to trauma healing, because it's
How
not
about
just depression
how
for
about
me.
telling John and listeners what your degree is in? That's why you understand all this, and then you can elaborate on it about what's actually happening.
Sure. Oh, I studied neuroscience and psychology because I was a pre-medical student at University of Texas at Dallas. But I've also had my own mental health journey. I've been in counseling since I was 19. So I can honestly, transparently tell you that everything I know about mental health, or most of it has been from sitting on the couch, quote unquote, because there's actually a lot that I don't remember in school because of the situation I was going through when I was in school. So I remember quite a bit, but it's the integrating the degrees and the actual counseling experience and the pain and everything that I
So the
have.
traumas you were experiencing. So they were
Yeah,
traumas you were experiencing.
yeah, and
Okay.
the therapy, and so all together, I do not consider myself an expert, but there's just quite a bit that I have to say, and it's just so important to educate people and talk about our experiences, So I want to thank John for sharing that, because being vulnerable can be a little hard.
Yeah. Do you think it was, in your case, do you think it was childhood issues that you had to go back and unpack?
That is the simple answer. I know exactly kind of what it is. When you childhood adverse experiences, right? There's like a whole scale called ACE. And to simplify that, when people look at that list and they can check off like kind of if they remember their childhood and what they went through, there's an increased risk for, let's say, anxiety, depression, or PTSD or stuff like that. And so for me, sometimes, just family dysfunction, and to various degrees for years, can change the brain, with the unhealthiness of how relationships went, or just the constant stress or chaos that sometimes can go in families. There's been a lot of
it was in my family.
Yeah.
It was in my family too. It's when I was a kid, and that's why I have PTSD and other things like that. That's where like I was just in a session with my therapist telling her how sometimes I wonder if I even have a calling in this world,
Yeah.
But it's
that's a purpose.
and she and John and a lot of other people who know me could say, well, I've achieved this. Like one of my recognitions this year, the one I got this year was for being one of the top 30 most influential women worldwide. And yet I wonder if I have a reason to list.
Wow. No, it's that chronic emptiness because complex PTSD, there's a difference between PTSD and complex PTSD. So if you don't mind, can I explain that a little bit?
Yeah, go for it.
Please.
Okay, so most people know PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. something horrible happens and your brain freaks out and you have these symptoms that usually last, I think if I'm correct, a couple of months, and then you're kind of better. Well,
Yeah.
Complex PTSD is when the traumatic event, now trauma is subjective to everybody. What can be traumatic for one person may not be for another person. But
Right.
That's true.
when someone goes through something that is traumatic for years at a time or months, it changes the brain. So you get all the symptoms of regular PTSD, but now this would be called complex PTSD. And it also includes dysfunction in relationships, self-concept, and there was another one, emotional regulation, I believe. I have to go back and double check.
Probably.
But the sense of self and the chronic emptiness that you just described, in a way, I don't want to put words in your mouth. It's an identity thing, because when we go through so much trauma prolonged, there can be trouble with our sense of self. So when people see all the outer success, we may not identify with that, because we're still literally trying to figure out what the heck happened, whether it's conscious or not conscious, with the stuff we went through. So our mind can be like stuck.
But do you think it's that we're always trying to figure out what happened to us, or do we know what happened to us and we're trying to figure out who we are after going through that?
Yes, thank you. That's what I mean. All the things basically that get convoluted because of what we went through, we may be trying to figure out, or it may be like a rumination thing where it's things going on a loop and we're having a constant conversation with ourselves. For me, like, it was years of, I didn't know what rumination was for a long time. And that's also why I didn't have peace. It was the constant, like, just self-talk and just wait, but my life is going, the years are passing, but I'm still trying to figure out what the world
You're stuck in history.
Right. And that's why I say, like, and a lot of us are living that way, but a lot of people aren't getting therapy, whether it's, the barriers to therapy, right? Financial stigma,
right? Insurance or lack of insurance.
Yeah, culture.
Yeah,
I have some things to talk about culture with my experience in the Hispanic culture, and that's a whole conversation. But it's even
hey,
to be honest,
if you talk about those Latinos, you're talking about my stepmom, who's another prime example. She's Latino, and she was recognized this year as being the number 3 in the most influential women in Texas.
Wow.
And 2 years in a row, she's recognized as being one of the most influential women in Houston, Texas, like on the top 30.
Wow.
So, and there's those stigmas and other things that come with the Latinos, right? And then there's the people like you and her that sees and rise above, because you have that constant, say, determination or something to show that you really are equally human, that goes against racism and other issues, right? But it takes an impact on your mental state, even if it's not a quote mental illness. It's something about the view of yourself, right?
Yeah.
You got to prove this something, right?
For me, I think, to be honest, and hear my heart when I say this, the ignorance around the lack of education for mental health. I don't think anyone meant harm. But for example, I want to honor my family, but I basically had a family member show signs of major struggle. We'll put it that way.
Oh, wow.
Things that it was like an acute situation. Well, they were offered herbal tea to help with the nerves. I was little, so I couldn't do much. But I look back at that and I'm like, that was a hospital situation. It should have been. And so, like, I think that that's why I'm so big on education, because the lack of education, or just trying to, sweep things under the rug, and everyone trying to maintain the normalcy of whatever they're used to and just ignoring signs, right? That's not even a cultural thing. I think that's a widespread thing. But I think for me, I'm just speaking for myself, I think the Hispanic culture has something to do with it a little bit. Because honestly, when you're a little, oh, go
I've
ahead.
got to make some announcement, but can we revisit that after I do this announcement?
Yeah.
Okay, so please keep that on your mind. Founded in 1913 by inventor William Stanley Jr., Stanley has been there for generations of adventures. They were built on invention, innovation, and inspiration, with a timeless spirit that complements your wildest dreams. Over 100 years later, a steady stream of products continues to honor the Stanley legacy, keeping your warms warm and your colds cold. Stanley is there for all your adventures so you can make the most of your world, whether you're scaling a mountain or climbing an elm tree in your own backyard. We'll be with you on your journey, just as they have with generations past, helping to build a more sustainable, less disposable life and world while opening the door to an awe-inspiring future. Be sure to visit the link included in our chat as well as in the description, shopstyle.it.
Oh, sorry, you guys.
Thank you, everybody. And please be sure to check out Stanley's link in our description. And please be sure, if you would like to also support us in other ways, check out our Patreon link in the description as well. And now we will be thanking Stanley for sponsoring us, as well as turning the show back to Lucero. And please continue on with your discussion.
Yeah, sorry. I think I received a call and it messed the screen up. I'm back. And I specifically was like, anyway, I told my people, please don't call me right now. I'm doing something awesome. Talking about mental health. It's an honor.
Hey, be alive. That's great. Even being alive is great.
Yes, it is. There is so much purpose and hope. That stupid darkness, that's just a symptom. It's not real.
Right? It's deception.
It's interesting and just fascinating at the same time how it can just play tricks on our brain. Okay, where was I? Yeah, with the family stuff. So one of the things I want to do, because sometimes when you know something well or you have a lot of experience, you assume that people have this basic knowledge, and they don't, if they haven't struggled or they don't know anyone or they didn't go to school for it. So one of the things I definitely would like to do is educate people a little more on mental health. But man, culture and mental health. Do we want to get into that? Because that is a whole conversation. And then sometimes, because sometimes certain cultures might be a little lower income, take that with a grain of salt. Okay. That can be a barrier to treatment.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole stigma. There's stigma in the United States, but I think that we're doing a good job trying to actively raise awareness for that.
But let's not think that mental health and income are separate, because sometimes things like situations like depression can be instigated because you can't afford food to eat or something else, that's where income leads to it. So they're not
Yeah.
necessarily
Then it's
separate
just
versus
literally
one
a
impacts the
logical
other.
reaction to life. Right. But then the question becomes, is it depression? I mean, it is, but like, it's really a reaction to your life right now. Like, of course, like anyone would maybe be depressed or extremely anxious if they literally can't feed their child food or
Okay,
buy
if you want to
diapers.
question, if you want to question the accuracy of that, why did so many people who had never had any history, family history of mental illnesses, get it after the pandemic? When we all were secluded to just our homes, and
Yeah.
we didn't even have enough of everything. That there was a lot of stuff that was rationed during the pandemic. Like I remember locally we had what we could only get 1 or 2 paper towels at a time, and
Yeah.
there was other food items, and not just like you know, plates and that kind of stuff. But
Mhm.
what do you think about those ones that didn't have the vehicle or couldn't afford the Uber ride to get there,
Mm.
that had no way to access that 1 or 2 paper towels?
Mm.
Do you see where I'm going?
Well, it makes you,
So that inequality in
yeah.
the finances can lead to certain groups or people of certain income levels being more vulnerable because they're going without those certain things.
100%. There's so many questions in there because it makes me think, well, you said like, you know, they may not have a family history or personal history of mental illness. Well, a personal history documented. What if it was been make that undiagnosed the whole time? Maybe they've been in denial themselves, and then because they don't have all the distractions that they used to have, like socializing all the time or compulsively, and now they get to be quiet in their own mind, then those symptoms might manifest, you know, a little more, because it's like, oh, now I'm just left with my own mind. That's
Well,
maybe.
but also there could be that it did exist in their family history, but it was before mental illnesses were truly understood,
Right.
unlike the days of the what they call that, the asylum.
Yeah.
That's where it has such a bad stigma that people would not come out and try to get help because they that's where they would go back in those days. So
Oh,
people
yeah.
of different generations won't even speak out.
And then the whole horrible conditions that they were subjected to anyway, that would make anyone go nuts.
You know, I grew up in the 1950s. I'm 71 years old now. And that generation and the generations before that just never talked about stuff. There would be a lot of things that would occur within the family and nobody would talk about it. So it was hard to really understand what was happening to people. My generation was probably the first generation, I'm talking about the 60s and maybe the 70s, that people started to get help and started to talk about mental illness. When I was growing up, and here's a story for you, I had to unpack this from my 12-step program because we would go into our childhood issues and we would, like peeling back an onion, trying to find out what happened to us as kids because a lot of stuff we didn't want to think about, connect to. I was a very tough kid, and I was raised in a Catholic family, but I was and I went to a Catholic grade school, but I was abused in the Catholic grade school. Um, but what happened to me also is they thought I was retarded growing up in kindergarten and first grade, and they took me to a mental health person to try to help me. And it turns out, after visiting with him for one visit, he said, "This kid's not retarded. He's just hard of hearing." Okay. So I was deaf in one ear, and I was very, and it still follows me. But they took me to a hearing aid doctor, and he said, "Yeah, this kid is deaf in one ear." And but I remember those first couple years that they have always stayed with me because they were like, "This kid's just stupid," you know. I just couldn't hear stuff what was going on. But that's something that has followed me all my life. I'm a very creative person. I do graphic arts and photography. But as soon as I come up against something that is not working out, um, my first thought in my mind is they were right. I am stupid. So it's that mental talk that you talk, even at this age right now, when I run into an issue, trying to be creative in something that I know how to do, my first thought is, yeah, I am stupid. Those people were right. And it's like a self-talk. I got to go back and then say, no, they were wrong. They were wrong. Even I have two older sisters that are about 10 and 8 years older than I am. And they still have a habit of looking at me as I'm less than them. Okay. But so it really affected them also, you know. And when I work on things, I go way overboard because I'm trying to prove it to my mind, in my head, that I'm equal to other people. But it's a strange thing. I know going through the 12-step program, and every week we would have questions that would bring us back to our childhoods, how we dealt with our parents, our mother, our father, how we dealt with culture, how we dealt with different things that were going on in the world around us at the time. I grew up through the Vietnam War years, all of that stuff, and I became very anti-war. But it was just, but these things just kind of just stick with you. And I think, like you said, you got to have therapy. You got to talk this out with somebody and say, hey, this is what's going on. And sometimes you got to go back to it again and again and again. Our mental state is a strange thing. I always think about how we think about things, and it's a complex issue, very complex, and it affects us when we're kids more so than we even realize.
Yes.
I think I had grown up with a lot of anger issues all my life. So trying to deal with that, why was I so angry? Why did different people feel like they had to gang up on me? You know, so I just know the 12 step, and I'm connecting with an organization now here too that I will be interviewing, and it's called Mending the Soul, organization called Mending the Soul. And actually, it was a big deal here in the United States, but they have started to doing Mending the Soul in Africa, in the Congo, where all these girls have been, these fighters have come into the villages and taken these girls captive, and they have traumatic problems with that. So they're trying to do Mending the Soul there too. What does it take to heal a soul that has gone through some really traumatic abuse? And abuse can come from anywhere. Can
John,
everything, especially women, especially women. Um, Men can have it too, but especially women when it comes to having relationships and being raped and being all that kind of stuff too. And it sears the brain. Something happens, something's going on that has caused a scab of enormous proportions. How do we heal ourselves? What do we got to do to heal ourselves? Do we go to alcohol? Do we go to drugs? Do we go to all these things to try to make us feel somewhat healthy? I don't even
John,
think, yeah.
while you're on that, do you have any announcements or want to tell any of the listeners about what you know about this Mending the Soul? I think you said is the name of your new show.
I don't know a lot about it yet. I have a friend that's going to be teaching it. and she was telling me they had a thing where right here in Phoenix where they had a big mending the soul group meeting, and they had a lot of the women from the Congo that actually showed up and made African food, but they were talking about all the abuse that happened to all these girls. But there was a lot of abuse with the guys too. You know, these were like 12 and 14-year-old kids, boys, that got roped into using automatic weapons and going from village to village and killing the adults. Um, how do human beings deal with some of this stuff? You know, what is it that we've got to try to separate and try to make sense of? And I think a lot of times it's almost impossible to make sense out of it unless you have God right there with you. And he's trying to
Yep.
connect with you and help you to understand what has happened to you in the past, you know?
Hey, you
We are,
Lucero? He might be your perfect person to do your show on.
Yes, hold on. I'm sorry if you can't see my screen. I'm trying to fix it. Someone else
John,
called. Why do people do things at the wrong time?
Because we don't communicate. That's what we start out
when
the show
it
about,
freaks
right?
me out.
I'll say stuff that is somewhat inappropriate, and I sit back and I go, "Why did I say that? What?
You know
what? I am retarded."
No, call it. It's
retarded,
authenticity. No. It's authenticity. It's speaking your mind. I have to reel it in too.
Filter. Or to no filter, and they call it Asperger's, which is what I have.
I know. I have to work on that because I really try to be intentional. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, back to the.
You know, this is a
John and Lucero. Talk about this show that we're talking about starting up. Lucero's going to be the host, and this is going to be mental health and Christianity blended together.
Okay. Just so you know, I'm a born again Christian. I was an atheist until I was 30 years old, and it came out of being abused in the Catholic Church. And I wanted nothing to do with the name Jesus or God or anything. So I became a very nasty atheist. God used that same experience early in my life and came back and revisited on me later. And it actually brought me back to God. God, sometimes God is hilarious, some of the stuff that he does to us. And I know at some point in time, we will be lifted off of this planet and we won't have to deal with a lot of this crap anymore. But for right now, the human experience on this planet has been very harsh on a lot of people. And God has allowed that to occur. I'm not totally sure why he has done that. I think a lot of people will not reach out to God and ask God into their lives unless bad things happen to them. And I just, I know it happened to me, had to happen in my life, my wife's life, and it's just so many things. I've become a Christian apologetic now, so I write a lot of things. I wrote an article that was how people become atheists. How does that happen? What happens in their lives that makes that to occur? We have a lot of anger in our lives, but we have a lot of anger towards God too. We hate God in a lot of ways. And how do we unpack that? How do we look at that? God's a big God. He's not going to be offended by our hatred towards him. He just knows that this planet is a tough place.
Yes. And everybody, so now you've heard what John has to say about Christ, and Lucero is going to be soon starting a show that will be here on John's Coffee Chat. called Mental Wellness with Christ. And possibly you will find John Taro on that one as well. But definitely you will find Lucero, who is going to be the host of that new show. We are in the planning stages, but we just want everybody to know. So be sure to, if you're interested in listening to this future show, not this one we're doing now, but this future one that we're talking about, where it'll be Christ integrated and mixed into mental health, then please be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. And then to watch out for notifications of the Mental Wellness with Christ show to begin in the coming months. It will be in the later part of 2023. We don't know the month yet, but we know it'll be in 2023. And I also want to thank Lucero Martinez for being on our show. This is her first time on mental health awareness. Y'all may have seen her Friday on the Amy Varley Live. Anything you want to leave people with as your last words?
Gosh, well, thank y'all so much. I think that let's just talk more about our journeys, our mental health journeys, our struggles. It frees other people. Being the first one to talk about, I'm really struggling with my depression today, or I'm having a rough day. A lot of people speak in code when they really just want to say, I'm having suicidal thoughts. Like,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And yeah, it's hard to get, I've been in therapy for a while, so I'm there with the vulnerability and stuff. I understand that it can be difficult, but just starting a conversation, asking your family members, your friends, are you okay? I noticed this. You haven't been X, Y, and Z as much, etc. Asking those around you, checking in on others, checking in with yourself, engaging in self-care, not abandoning ourselves. Let's change the world. Let's change the world with just conversation, with conversations. This podcast.
We'll leave it at that. Everybody needs to start by trying to help make a difference in others with mental illnesses by having conversations to inquire of what may truly be going on behind that code.
But it takes being honest with ourselves too. So
now we're going to carry on to let Stanley know we are so grateful for Stanley's generosity and support of our podcast. Their commitment to providing quality products at great prices has been an invaluable asset to us, and we are so thankful for their help. We hope everyone takes advantage of these great deals they have this season and enjoys the gifts they have to offer. Thank you again for your support, Stanley. And we are on to announcements. Does anybody have announcements of anything coming up?
No, we did for Christ Talk with the people that I've been interviewing. We took a month off in October, so we're all coming back in. I have a scientist that I interview. He's an astrophysicist, and he talks about God. And he wrote a book about God and astrophysicists. And I have a poet that comes on and talks about her poetry. I have a Messianic Jew that comes on and talks about Jews that believe in Jesus Christ. Let's see who else I got. I got a whole bunch of people. It's like a real cross section, and it's very interesting to hear all these people talk about different things. So that's all I got.
Okay, and then we'll go on to the next announcement. For those of you who may be part of the HNP, you may know that Afro Film International Film and Market Festival is coming up October 12th through October 14th. And that's in 2023, and what's a matter of days away. However, in order for it to be made virtual, available online, and to find live here on Jaws Coffee Chat, We are looking for more sponsors to sponsor $10,000 that they still need in order to have the equipment for Afro Film and Market Festival to be virtual on Zoom, so many of us ordinary everyday people can attend without paying the large expenses. So if you're interested in supporting this film and market festival, that's where TV production, acting, script writing, and all related professionals will be networking, please call 213-844-8505. And that is to talk to Jasper Johnson, who is the owner and founder of the Afro International Film and Market Festival. You can also email him at afrofilmfest@gmail.com. That's AFRFilmFEST@gmail.com. We are constantly looking for other people to financially support the Film and Market Festival to help return our movies to being produced, get our actors and the writers and all back to work through networking opportunities, so that those who do want to work can gain the access to the different people who are searching for their skills. And lastly, most of y'all know about the Project Die Hard. We'll be launching the PDH Mission Monday, November 6, 2023 at 6:30 Central. It'll be a podcast we do with Project Die Hard every Monday from 6:30 to 7:30 Central, starting on November 6, 2023. If you're interested in being on the Project Die Hard Monday Mission or Project Die Hard Mission Monday podcast, please start by going to our website, jensbooksandmore.com. The link you will find in the description, and then go under products to select Project Die Hard, and there you will find the directions and all the documents you need to sign up to be on the veterans focused Project Die Hard Mission Monday podcast. You can also email monday@projectdiehard.org. That's monday@projectdiehard.org. And from there, Emily or Kurt will let you know how to schedule with them to be a guest on our show. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, everybody, for listening, tuning in, whether you watched us live or you watched us some kind of later time. We appreciate John, as always, Lucero, our special guest of today, and soon to be seen quite a bit more often, right, Lucero?
Yes. Excited. Good.
Thank you,
All the Lord for this. Let's do it, though.